January to 1609, the search party found them exactly as they died, 47 colonists, frozen solid, their fingers still clawing at their cabin doors. But 3 miles away, in the same killing blizzard, an entire Powhatan village slept peacefully through the night. The difference? A secret so disturbing that colonial governors banned anyone from writing about it. What the Powhatan knew, what all native tribes knew, would have saved those colonists. But they chose death over learning from savages. Tonight, you'll discover why sleeping the native way meant surviving temperatures that turned European blood to ice. The colonial records describe the scene: mothers found clutching dead infants, men frozen while trying to burn furniture for warmth, children's tears turned to ice on their cheeks. The temperature that night? -40 degrees. The same temperature inside the native camps just over the ridge, but inside those native shelters? Anthropologist James Adair documented in 1775, the savages lay as comfortable as if in summer, their children playing, their elders telling stories. How? Because they had mastered something the colonists called devil's magic, the ability to create 70-degree warmth in sub-zero death. The tribal elders knew what would happen. They'd watched it before. White settlers arriving, rejecting their wisdom, then freezing to death in droves. One Lakota elder was recorded saying, "They die because they fight the winter. We live because we marry it." In 2019, archaeologists excavating colonial sites made a disturbing discovery. Every winter death site was within walking distance of thriving native camps. The natives hadn't just survived, they'd thrived. While colonists ate their dead to survive, native children were playing in the snow. The first secret was so simple it seemed impossible. While colonists built massive fires that consumed entire forests and still froze, natives used tiny fires that somehow heated entire families. The difference wasn't the fire, it was where they put it. The teepee wasn't just a tent, it was a convection engine. That cone shape? It created a natural chimney effect. Hot air rose, hit the slanted walls, and circulated down in a perfect thermal loop. The colonists' square cabins? They trapped smoke and let heat escape through the roof. But the real horror for colonists was what came next. Native Americans wrapped themselves in buffalo hides, so fresh the blood hadn't dried. They slept inside the skins, not just under them. The colonists called it barbaric. The natives called it warm. Mary Rowlandson, captured in 1676, wrote, "They forced me to sleep in the bloody skins of beasts, still warm from the kill." What she didn't understand? Those fresh hides retained animal body heat for hours. Her civilized wool blankets? Useless when wet. Then came the practice colonists found most disturbing. Entire families, grandparents, parents, children, even strangers would strip down and press their naked bodies together inside the furs, skin to skin, breath to breath. The colonists called it savage indecency. Science calls it thermal efficiency. Modern thermal studies prove it. 6 bodies pressed together generate 600 watts of heat, equivalent to a modern space heater. The natives knew this 500 years before we invented thermodynamics. While colonists died alone in their beds, natives survived through calculated intimacy. But here's where it gets truly ingenious. Before bed, they'd heat river stones to 400 degrees. Not random rocks, specific stones that wouldn't explode. Geology wasn't a science to them, it was survival. Choose wrong? The stone shatters and blinds you. These stones, wrapped in bark and hide, were placed at strategic body points: feet, lower back, chest. They radiated heat for 8 to 10 hours. One colonist, who finally tried it, wrote, "It was like sleeping with pieces of the sun." The wind was death incarnate. Prairie winds could freeze exposed skin in under 60 seconds. But the natives had a solution so effective, we still use it in Arctic construction today. They built their shelters with aerodynamic precision. They'd pack snow in a specific pattern around the base, not randomly, but in calculated ridges that deflected wind upward. The snow itself became insulation. What colonists saw as the enemy, natives transformed into armor. Then came the hide skirts. extra flaps of skin that hung to the ground, weighted with stones. These created an airtight seal that modern tent makers didn't replicate until the 1960s. Every gap, every potential draft eliminated with prehistoric precision. Governor William Bradford wrote in 1621, "The savages mock our suffering, showing us their heathen ways, but pride forbids us from adopting the methods of these godless creatures." That pride? It killed more colonists than all the wars combined. When conditions became unbearable, natives did something colonists couldn't. They moved. Entire villages relocated in hours. They read the land like a book, knowing which valleys trapped cold, which ridges caught morning sun. Colonists frozen to their permanent settlements. Children learned to read death in the sky, the way clouds moved, how ice formed on trees, the behavior of animals, all signals. A 7-year-old native child could predict a killing storm 3 days out. Colonial adults, they prayed and died. Food storage was another deadly difference. Natives created pemmican, dried meat mixed with fat and berries, packed so dense it lasted years. Colonists tried storing European foods that froze, rotted or attracted bears. Guess who starved? Every piece of clothing was engineered. Fur-lined moccasins with the hair turned inward, creating air pockets. Mittens connected by sinew so they couldn't be lost. Layer upon layer, each with purpose. Colonists wore fashion. Natives wore physics. Spring 1610 revealed the truth. Colonial settlements, graveyards with more dead than living. Native camps, children born during the worst winter in memory, playing in melting snow. The difference wasn't luck. It was knowledge. Finally, desperation overcame pride. Some colonists begged to learn. The few who listened lived. They discovered the ultimate truth. Survival wasn't about conquering winter. It was about becoming winter. But what they learned next would haunt European descendants for generations. Satan XII, Minister Thomas Shepherd, declared native survival methods Satan's tricks and ordered all colonists to reject them. That winter, his own congregation lost 31 members to cold. The natives watching from the forest didn't lose a single soul. But desperation breeds heresy. Colonial women began meeting natives in secret, learning their ways. Mary Allerton wrote, "I care not for my soul if my children freeze. Show me your heathen magic." What she learned saved her family. And got her excommunicated. Families split. Fathers forbade native ways while mothers secretly implemented them. Children survived in homes where pride gave way to pragmatism. One survivor wrote, "Mother's sins kept us warm while father's faith froze our neighbors." The food knowledge was even more critical. Pemmican wasn't just dried meat, it was a calculated ratio of protein, fat, and vitamins. 1 pound could sustain a person for days. Colonists trying to recreate it without proper knowledge created rancid poison that killed faster than starvation. Winter hunting required reading signs colonists couldn't see. Breath patterns in cold air revealing hidden deer, ice formations showing where animals crossed. Natives found food in barren landscapes where colonists saw only death. They created underground caches marked by signs only they could read. A bent twig, a specific rock formation, maps hidden in plain sight. Colonists walked over fortunes in preserved food, starving because they couldn't read the land's language. Winter medicine was another closely guarded secret. Pine needle tea for scurvy, willow bark for fever, echinacea for infection. Colonists died from preventable diseases while the cures grew outside their doors. Frostbite treatment revealed the knowledge gap. Colonists used hot water, causing tissue death. Natives used gradual warming with specific herbs that increased blood flow. Colonists lost fingers. Natives kept theirs. Even children's games were survival training. Find the warm spot taught microclimate detection. Stone heating made fire management fun. By age 5, native children had skills colonial adults would die without. Snowshoes weren't just bent wood and sinew. The weave pattern distributed weight using principles we now call load distribution algorithms. Each tribe's design matched their terrain perfectly, physics disguised as craft. Dogs weren't pets, they were survival partners, bred for specific traits, trained from birth. They could sense storms, find cached food, and generate heat. Colonists saw animals, natives saw allies. They navigated blizzards using techniques colonists called impossible, reading wind patterns on snow, using stars when visible, following magnetic variations in rocks. GPS centuries before satellites. The sweat lodge wasn't recreation, it was medical technology. Controlled heat and cold exposure strengthened the body's thermal regulation, what colonists called torture. Science now calls cold thermogenesis therapy. While colonists starved, surrounded by food, native women taught their daughters to find nutrition in winter's wasteland. Cattail roots buried under ice, pine bark rich in vitamin C, rose hips that prevented scurvy. The forest was their pharmacy and grocery store combined. By 1620, some colonists resorted to grave robbing, not human graves, but native food caches. They'd follow tracks to hidden stores, stealing survival meant for entire tribes. The natives, watching from shadows, let them take just enough to survive. Mercy disguised as strategy. The clothing system was pure engineering. Inner layer, soft rabbit fur against skin. Middle layer, dense beaver fur for insulation. Outer layer, waterproof bear hide. Air trapped between layers created thermal barriers colonists couldn't replicate with their wool and linen. Fire in a blizzard? Impossible, said the colonists, but the native elders could create flame in conditions that defeated European techniques. They used birch bark tinder that burned even when wet, specific wood combinations that resisted wind, and fire lay patterns that self-fed for hours. When teepees weren't enough, they built underground. Not crude caves, but engineered earth lodges with ventilation systems, drainage and thermal mass. These shelters maintained 50-degree temperatures when surface air hit minus 60. Colonial root cellars, frozen death traps. Weather prediction was life or death. They read signs colonists ignored, how squirrels gathered nuts, where birds roosted, how horses positioned themselves. Animals became their meteorologists, predicting storms days before they struck. By 1625, knowledge became currency. Desperate colonists traded silver, guns, even land for native winter secrets. One documented exchange, 40 acres, for the technique of reading ice thickness. The seller, a 12-year-old native girl who knew what grown European men didn't. Fat wasn't just food, it was survival technology. Rendered bear fat mixed with specific herbs created waterproof skin protection. Seal blubber became lamp fuel that burned for weeks. Colonists saw waste where natives saw winter insurance. Even their tools were winter adapted. Metal became brittle in extreme cold, shattering when colonists needed them most. Native tools, bone, antler, specially treated wood remained functional at any temperature. Technology that worked when it mattered. Native children were conditioned from birth. Cold exposure in controlled doses, breathing exercises that increased lung capacity, games that built cold tolerance. By adolescence, they could function in temperatures that hospitalized European adults. 1630, Governor John Winthrop, watching his people die while natives thrived, finally wrote, "We are the savages here. They possess knowledge we lack, wisdom we scorned, and skills we desperately need." But for thousands of colonists, this admission came too late. But the deepest secret wasn't physical, it was psychological. Natives didn't just survive winter, they embraced it. While colonists cowered in fear, native shamans performed rituals that transformed winter from enemy to ally. The mind, they knew, controlled the body's response to cold. Fear killed more colonists than cold. Panic increased heat loss. Stress weakened immunity. Despair destroyed will to live. Native children learned winter was a teacher, not a monster. They played in conditions that terrorized European adults. Fear killed more colonists than cold. Panic increased heat loss. Stress weakened immunity. Despair destroyed will to live. Native children learned winter was a teacher, not a monster. They played in conditions that terrorized European adults. They practiced what we now call cold meditation, sitting motionless in freezing temperatures, controlling breathing and heart rate. This wasn't spiritual theater. It was physiological training. They literally rewired their nervous systems to function in cold. Military discipline crumbled in extreme cold. Colonial soldiers abandoned posts, deserted ranks, chose court-martial over freezing. Native warriors stood watch through the worst storms, their training making them immune to conditions that broke European military order. Stories were survival tools. Native elders told tales that transformed suffering into purpose, cold into challenge, winter into a test of worthiness. Colonial ministers preached doom and punishment. Guess which approach kept people alive? Mindset shaped reality. Natives saw winter as hunting season, when animal tracks were visible, when meat preserved naturally, when the land offered different gifts. Colonists saw winter as starvation season. Both were right based on their knowledge. Breath control was everything. Natives taught specific breathing patterns that increased core temperature, improved circulation, and calmed panic. One colonial woman who learned wrote, "Their breathing turned my body into a furnace from within." They found joy in winter's heart, singing, dancing, storytelling, activities that generated heat, bonded communities, and maintained mental health. Colonists sat in grim silence, conserving energy while their spirits died. Fear was learned, not natural. Native infants were gradually exposed to cold, building tolerance from birth. Colonial children were sheltered until their first harsh winter, then thrown into conditions their bodies couldn't handle. They taught that winter made warriors. Each survived storm was a victory. Each night of warmth earned through skill was a triumph. Colonists saw winter as something to endure. Natives saw it as something to conquer. By 1635, some colonial leaders secretly participated in native winter ceremonies. They learned that survival required more than technique. It required transformation. The proud Europeans had to become something new to live. Native women held the deepest knowledge. They understood that winter survival began in the mind, flowed through the heart, and manifested in the body. Colonial women who learned this saved their families. Those who didn't watch them die. Mental breakdown preceded physical death. Colonists developed what we now recognize as seasonal depression, cabin fever, and PTSD from winter trauma. Natives had cultural practices that prevented these conditions entirely. Winter was vision quest season. Young natives sought spiritual guidance in the harshest conditions. Emerging with wisdom and strength, they transformed suffering into enlightenment. Colonists just suffered. The few colonial families who fully adopted native mental practices didn't just survive, they thrived. They learned to see winter as teacher, cold as strengthener, hardship as opportunity. Their descendants became the frontier's strongest survivors. Knowledge lived in stories, songs, and ceremonies. Each generation received not just techniques, but the mental framework to use them. Colonists had books that froze and became useless. Natives had living wisdom that grew stronger with each telling. Determination was the ultimate survival tool. Natives faced the same storms, the same cold, the same challenges as colonists. The difference? They believed they would survive, and that belief became reality. They taught children that winter was a friend who tested them to make them stronger. Colonial children learned winter was a monster that wanted to kill them. Both groups got exactly what they expected. Even colonial ministers eventually admitted the truth. Reverend John Eliot wrote, "Their heathen practices preserve life, while our Christian suffering brings death." Perhaps God speaks through their wisdom too. Native warriors used winter as their gymnasium. Cold exposure built endurance. Harsh conditions tested limits. Survival challenges forged character. They emerged from winter stronger. Colonists emerged broken, if they emerged at all. The colonial families who completely embraced native winter philosophy underwent total transformation. They stopped being Europeans trying to survive in America and became Americans who thrived in winter. The difference was everything. Natives taught that winter revealed who you really were and built who you could become. It stripped away pretense, tested resolve, and forged character. Colonists saw winter as punishment. Natives saw it as opportunity. By 1640, the surviving colonial settlements looked nothing like European towns. They had become hybrid communities where native wisdom merged with European determination. The price of survival?
Abandoning everything they thought they knew about living.
1642, the Massachusetts Bay Colony officially banned the teaching of native winter techniques, calling them devil's work that corrupts Christian souls. That winter, 127 colonists died. In nearby native camps, 0 deaths. The ban remained in effect for 30 years. Colonial women formed secret societies to learn native techniques. They met in hidden locations, shared forbidden knowledge, and saved their families while their husbands remained ignorant. These women became the first true American survivors. Ice reading was life or death knowledge. Natives could determine ice thickness by sound, color, and crystal formation. They knew which ice would hold a person, which would crack, which hid deadly currents beneath. Colonists fell through ice and drowned weakly. Starting fire in a blizzard required techniques colonists
Called impossible.
Natives used char cloth made from specific fungi, tinder bundles that burned underwater, and fire-lay methods that self-sustained in hurricane winds.
Physics masquerading as magic.
Winter camouflage was an art form. Natives could become invisible in snow, using techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered by military forces. Until World War II, they hunted game that never saw them coming, gathered intelligence on enemies who never knew they were watched. Colonial spies reported feats that seemed superhuman. Natives swimming in near-freezing water, walking barefoot on ice, sleeping uncovered in snow. These weren't miracles. They were the result of lifelong conditioning and techniques
Passed down for generations.
The winter landscape was their pharmacy. Natives extracted medicines from bark, roots, and berries that remained potent under snow. They created antibiotics from mold, painkillers from willow, and vitamins from pine needles. Nature's chemistry set. Native healers performed surgery in sub-zero temperatures, using techniques that prevented infection and promoted healing. They understood that cold could be medicine, slowing bleeding, reducing swelling, preventing gangrene. Colonial doctors declared winter surgery impossible while watching natives save lives. Snow wasn't just shelter material, it was engineering medium. Natives built structures with load-bearing calculations, thermal dynamics and ventilation systems. Their snow houses maintained perfect temperature, while colonial snow forts collapsed and suffocated their occupants. Moving silently through snow required techniques colonists never mastered. Natives could cross frozen ground without leaving tracks, walk on snow without breaking through, and travel at night using sounds and smells as guides. They were winter ghosts.
Animal tracks told stories colonists couldn't read.
Natives could determine an animal's health.
Age, sex, and destination from footprints in snow.
They tracked wounded game for miles, found lost tribe members, and avoided dangerous predators through track interpretation. Food preservation went beyond simple drying. Natives used controlled fermentation, specific salt mixtures, and natural preservatives that kept meat fresh for years. They created concentrated nutrition that sustained them when colonists starved surrounded by the same resources. Material science was survival science. Natives knew which materials remained strong in extreme cold, which became brittle, which expanded or contracted. Their tools worked when European metal snapped like glass. Finding liquid water in frozen landscapes required knowledge colonists lacked. Natives could locate springs under ice, identify safe snow for melting, and create water from sources colonists never considered. Dehydration killed colonists surrounded by frozen water. Combat in winter required completely different techniques. Natives adapted their fighting styles for snow, ice, and extreme cold. They used winter as a weapon, leading enemies into conditions that killed without a blow being struck. Even textile creation was winter adapted. Natives wove materials that remained flexible in cold, created waterproof fabrics from natural sources, and designed clothing that moved with the body while maintaining insulation. European textiles became rigid death shrouds. When colonial leaders finally witnessed the full scope of native winter mastery, they realized they weren't just technologically inferior.
They were living in a different reality.
Natives had evolved beyond mere survival into winter mastery, the ultimate native teaching. Winter wasn't a season to endure, but a season to master. They didn't just survive winter, they conquered it, controlled it, and made it serve their purposes. This was the knowledge colonists died without learning. The few colonial families who learned, all native techniques underwent complete transformation. They stopped being Europeans in America and became Americans who owned winter. Their descendants became the continent's greatest survivors. Native shamans taught that winter was the ultimate spiritual teacher. It stripped away illusions, revealed character, and taught the deepest truths about survival, community, and human potential. Winter was their university. The final tally was devastating. Colonial settlements became graveyards with survival rates below 30%. Native camps maintained populations, raised healthy children, and grew stronger each winter. The difference? Knowledge, wisdom, and respect for winter's power. Native children played in conditions that killed colonial adults. They were raised in winter mastery from birth, conditioned for success, and taught that cold was a friend to be understood. Each generation grew stronger. 1675, the Massachusetts Bay Colony officially acknowledged
Native superiority in winter survival.
Governor Josiah Winslow wrote, "We must learn their ways or perish. Pride has killed more of our people than all their warriors combined." When colonial determination finally merged with native wisdom, true American winter mastery was born. The survivors weren't European or native, they were something new. Americans who could thrive where others died. But there were secrets beyond secrets. Knowledge so powerful that natives shared it, only with those who proved worthy through years of testing. These ultimate techniques could mean the difference between surviving winter and ruling it completely. The deepest secret was mental. Advanced practitioners could generate body heat through pure thought, raising their core temperature by 15 degrees through meditation alone. This wasn't mysticism, it was neuroscience centuries before the term existed. Master-level natives could read the land's thermal signatures, knowing where underground springs created warm spots, where rock formations trapped heat, where microclimates offered refuge. They saw heat where others saw only cold death. The ultimate technique was becoming one with winter itself, not fighting it, not enduring it, but merging with it until cold became strength. Storms became allies and winter became home. This was the knowledge that created legends. Weather masters could predict storms with supernatural accuracy, reading atmospheric pressure through body sensation, humidity through skin response, and temperature changes through breath patterns. They became living barometers. Advanced warriors used winter as a weapon. They could lead enemies into killing cold, use storms as cover for attacks, and survive in conditions that destroyed pursuing forces. Winter became their ally in warfare. Master healers could reverse frostbite and hypothermia, using techniques that seemed miraculous. They understood circulation, nerve response, and tissue regeneration in ways that wouldn't be rediscovered by medicine for centuries. The few colonists who achieved complete mastery underwent total transformation. They stopped being human victims of winter and became winter's masters. Their descendants ruled the frontier while others merely survived it. Native elders taught that winter mastery was the path to understanding life itself. Those who could thrive in winter's extremes could handle any challenge. Winter was their final exam in the University of Survival. The ultimate paradox, finding abundance in winter's apparent scarcity. Masters knew where winter concentrated resources, how cold preserved opportunities, and why winter was actually the season of greatest potential for those who understood its secrets. Children who showed exceptional promise were initiated into the deepest mysteries. They learned techniques so advanced that they seemed supernatural, ways of surviving that transcended normal
Human limitations.
In settlements where colonists achieved true winter mastery, something remarkable happened. They stopped merely surviving and began thriving. Winter became their season of strength, their time of advantage over those who still feared the cold. True masters remained comfortable in conditions that would kill ordinary people. They had transcended normal human limitations through knowledge, conditioning, and techniques that pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. The moment of true understanding was unmistakable. Students suddenly grasped that winter wasn't their enemy, but their teacher, not their destroyer, but their creator. This realization changed everything about how they lived. The ultimate secret was this: winter mastery was really self-mastery. Those who conquered winter had conquered their own limitations, fears, and weaknesses. Winter was the mirror that showed who they really were. Families who achieved complete mastery did the impossible. They thrived in conditions that once meant certain death. Their children grew strong in winter, their elders lived longer, their communities grew more resilient. Wisdom keepers taught that winter was the season when humans could become more than human. Extreme conditions forced evolution, pushed boundaries, and revealed potential that comfortable seasons never unlocked. The final transformation was complete. Colonists who mastered native winter wisdom were no longer Europeans trying to survive in America. They had become Americans who owned the continent's harshest season. The evolution was complete. From colonial victims who died in droves to American masters who ruled winter itself. The price?
Abandoning everything they thought they knew about survival and embracing
Wisdom older than their civilization. The greatest native teachers smiled when their students surpassed even their own abilities. They had created something new. Americans who combined European determination with native wisdom to achieve winter mastery beyond what either culture had accomplished alone. Perfect harmony was achieved when humans stopped fighting winter and started dancing with it. They moved with its rhythms, used its power, and found strength in its challenges. Winter became their partner, not their enemy. Children of winter masters played fearlessly in conditions that once terrorized entire settlements. They had inherited not just techniques, but the mindset that made winter a playground rather than a graveyard. The ultimate victory. American settlements where winter was celebrated, not feared. Where the season that once brought death now brought strength, community, and the deep satisfaction of mastering nature's greatest challenge. The legacy endures. Generations of Americans inherited this winter mastery, carrying forward the knowledge that transformed European colonists into continental conquerors. They learned the ultimate truth: those who master winter master life itself.
and now you know their secrets too.
So here's your challenge, nightmare historians. Could you survive using only these native techniques? No modern gear, no heated homes, just the knowledge that kept entire civilizations alive through winters that killed thousands of colonists. Drop a comment with your survival plan, and if this opened your eyes to the incredible ingenuity of Native Americans.
Hit that subscribe button for more hidden
Histories that will change how you see the world. Because the past isn't just history, it's a survival manual for the future.